我们之前跟大家分享过了如何运用英文来展现个人的魅力。那今天的单元就来跟大家分享如何使用个人的魅力来化解一些尴尬或负面的情景。Hello， 欢迎来到 Executive Plus 主管与沟通力的 Podcast。I'm Sherry, an educator, certified coach, and style enthusiast. 我相信专业有效的沟通是语言跟逻辑的完美结合。
And I'm Nick, a startup consultant, corporate trainer, and late-night gaming junkie. I believe great communication requires the right mindset and solid frameworks.
我们希望带给大家职场英语的技能、跨文化沟通技巧与其他能帮助您成为出色领导者的工具。
Join us each week as we share our experience, research, and methodologies to take your communication and language skills from good to great. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Executive Plus podcast. In the past, we've talked about what it is to be charming, how to use self-deprecating humor, how to use charm. Today, we want to get into how do you maintain a either charming or polite demeanor when in either an awkward situation or when someone has offended you. So we've done a little digging to find out really what are the best communication techniques that you can use in these offensive or awkward situations.
那在我们职场当中啊，其实有的时候也会发生一些这种尴尬的场面，或许是在我们做一些社交的情景之下，或者是开会当中 or maybe 当你在回答人家一些问题的时候，可能有一些尴尬，有的时候可能会稍微比较 negative。 那我们要怎么运用一些小技巧或者是个人的魅力来帮助我们化解这些 situation？The
first technique is very appropriate for something we talked about in Premium this month, which is the use of questions. A lot of times when we think about like, okay, if I need to be witty or I need to have like a strong comeback, if someone insults me, I just insult them right back and make it worse. But sometimes it's not a matter of pushing back at the person. It's about making them realize or highlighting to other people around how inappropriate or rude they're being. And one of the best ways to do that is actually just by asking questions. So the first technique of asking questions, there's two ways of doing it. The first way of doing it is whatever they ask you, if they're being rude, you can just ask them that exact question back. You can mirror back what they say, but in a way that kind of highlights like, that's a ridiculous question.
Right.So one of the example we're going to talk about is Rihanna. 那大家应该都知道 Rihanna 是谁吧？那她在一个 interview 当中呢，就有记者问她说，这个 royal wedding, so you weren't invited? 他就问她这个问题。那 Rihanna 呢，马上就用了这个问题再反问对方，也就是 Why would you think I'm invited? 那从这个地方，我们马上就会感受到 Yeah, that's a ridiculous question.So
rather than pointing out the reporter is making a bad assumption, etc., is like by asking that question back, why would you think I'm invited? And then the reporter had to like quickly, well, you met the royal couple before. She's like, well, you met me. Does that mean that you're invited to my wedding? Am I invited to your wedding? Again, rather than get really insulting or even use that moment and be like, yeah, why wasn't I invited? Ellen DeGeneres style. But actually just literally mirroring that question and making the reporter kind of explain like, where are you coming from? But then pushing the reporter to like walk through the logic of, well, it's not that simple. Just because you know someone doesn't mean you are invited to their wedding.Yeah,
and I think that simple question just kind of point out that it's a really stupid question and there's no logic behind that question. 我相信那个 reporter 应该下次会比较小心一点。
The second example we have is not just mirroring, but taking it one step farther, where they use someone's question logic and then push it back at them.
Right.
So this example comes when Jimmy Fallon is interviewing the younger actors from Stranger Things. And one actor, Finn Wolfhard, Jimmy Fallon's joking, oh, you're so young. What do you know about the world? Are you even old enough? Can you read? And Finn's like, can I read? And then pushes back, can you host? right? When someone asks you this ridiculous question, rather than immediately start pushing back, and one way to be witty, he could have been, I can read as well as you can host, right? And make fun. But in this case, it was just mirror the questions back. You asked me something ridiculous. Let me say it out loud so you hear it.
Absolutely. 刚刚讲到这个，就是 it's really ridiculous. Obviously, 他看得懂字，他识字，他才能够去看那么多 script, actually act. So coming back with that question, can you host? I think that's like the best way to actually handle the situation.
Right. It's a very obvious thing. I had to read a script to be an actor, so obviously I can read. You are a host of a show, so let me ask you an equally ridiculous question.
Yeah, absolutely. 所以我们第一个 technique 也就是了 using question， 而且它是非常简单的一个方法，也就是利用人家的问题，你反问他，或者是你利用人家刚刚的逻辑去使用它，然后再反问人家。Now, there's another situation that we all hate, which is awkward situation. 就是那种很尴尬的那种场景 right? 我觉得它常常会发生了，在很多社交的场合啊，或者是公司开会啊，或者是做 presentation, something is wrong, something happened. And that awkward situation, I'm sure no one really likes that.
So a few techniques to handle an awkward situation. The first is something that we've covered in a previous podcast, which is self-deprecating humor. Or just your ability to stay positive or react, right? This may not work for everyone because sometimes if you're very shocked, it's hard to stay in the state. But if best you can, if someone makes an awkward situation, is just laugh along or bring humor to that situation. Maybe someone says something a little insulting, a little awkward, or a little dumb. Rather than getting upset or rather than insulting back, you can just kind of laugh and be like, wow, that's an interesting way to phrase it.
And I think we had a lesson before, right? We're talking about how to use humor. And it was like, for example, it was like, oh, you're so fat. And you can answer back to be, yeah, the fries had to go somewhere.
Right. It's like, my love of ice cream can never fade away. So taking that moment where someone is either insulting you or making a situation, maybe it's a gathering of friends together and then like the first thing someone says is just not that nice. And then now everyone's like quiet and like, oh, okay. But someone who can react positively, maybe self-deprecating humor, breaks that atmosphere and brings it back to something enjoyable again.
Yeah. Another way that you could do is just to change the subject. 那当然这个部分呢，你要转移话题的话，你也要稍微有点小技巧啦。So there are a lot of phrases that you could use here to bring in new topics. Like, oh, so by the way, or speaking of which, oh, that reminds me of. These are all pretty good sentences that you can use.
And sometimes if you just emphasize it, I'm going to change the subject, it makes it awkward for the person to bring it back. So that becomes part of it. If it just looks like you're avoiding the topic, then someone would be like, no, we're going to talk about this. But if you over dramatize, anyway, so let's talk about something else. Then now if that person wants to continue the awkward topic, they're the one who looks foolish because you've made it very clear, like, that's uncomfortable. We're going to go talk about this other thing.
Absolutely. So other things that you could say is, oh, I just wanted to tell you something before I forgot. Or let's change gears a little bit. And again, like, let's change gears a little bit. 这个跟 anyway 也是还蛮相近，也就是你很 intentionally trying to change the subject.
Yeah, in some cases, it may these are phrases where it sounds very obvious, but this is putting you back into control of that conversation. Be like, yeah, let's just start this meeting and then go from there.
Right. And also you could create a distraction. So you may want to bring in someone else into the conversation. It's like, oh, hey, Nick, how was your day? Just bring in someone and have them to join the conversation so that you can change the subject very smoothly.
The last technique that we want to share is actually not something you do for yourself, but something that you can do to help others out of this situation. And that's simply by complimenting them.
Yeah.
There's a great example of this where recently Ana de Armas, a Cuban actress, ahead of the release of her Netflix film Blonde about Marilyn Monroe, got a lot of pushback and a lot of negative media because people thought, how can a Cuban actress whose English is their second language possibly play one of the most famous Americans of all time? And so there was just this lot of criticism before the movie even came out, before anyone could look at her acting quality, etc. And when doing a press release or doing a premiere showing, one of her co-stars, Adrian Brody, kind of like diffused that tension where a lot of people are looking and be like, okay, we're going to definitely push on this question. And right up front, Adrian Brody she's someone who just transported me away. I've been doing this for such a long time, but I can say this is the first time someone truly took me to another time and place with their acting.
Yeah, so if you guys watched that press conference, 在 Venice Film Festival 他们有一个 press conference. 那在那个 press conference 你会感受得到他的 tension 还蛮高的，因为有很多的记者就一直是在他的这个口音，因为他是 Cuban 嘛 again 在他诠释 Marilyn Monroe 的时候，有的时候他可能那个口音会出来，所以有很多人就觉得说，那你这样子对 Marilyn Monroe 不好交代吧， like how could you do that? How could you find an actress who is an American to portray that role? 那其实你也看得出来，这个 actress Anna 她就是还蛮紧张的。And because English is not her native language, it's really hard for her to explain and kind of be comfortable. So you can tell that she was very uncomfortable. 她非常的紧张。所以我觉得当她旁边的 co-star 能够帮她站出来，然后 compliment 她，而且 compliment on her acting, not on anything else. It's really on her talent. I think that what's really make the situation a lot comfortable, and you can see that she started to kind of tear up a little bit. She was really touched.
Yeah, he really got ahead and sort of cut off that criticism because if someone who I believe has already won an Emmy or an Oscar for previous films stands up there and goes, this person is fantastic at what they do. It's very hard for the press to start insulting like, oh, well, what about this thing? Who are you to criticize this person when I have praised her?
Yeah.
And it's really impressive that he's willing to do that. And so, again, this is not a technique you can necessarily use for yourself. But when you see someone is about to go into an awkward situation or a very critical situation, and you have a way to either hedge or cut off the criticism before people really dive into it, it can be a very powerful tool.
所以希望借由今天的单元呢，不止你可以用你的魅力帮助自己，也可以帮助别人走出这个非常尴尬或者是比较负面的情况。So I really hope you guys find this useful.
We definitely hope that you enjoyed this quick look on how to diffuse these situations, and you will consider going forward. When I'm put into this awkward or difficult situation, do I fight back? Or do I use something simple like asking a question to point out the ridiculousness? Or if ever you see someone in a bit of trouble, jumping in and helping cut off that awkward feeling before it ever hits. Join us next time, and we'll talk to you guys later. Bye.
Bye. The Executive Plus podcast is a Presentality Group production, produced and hosted by Sherry Fang and Nick Howard. You can search us on Facebook, 主管英文 Executive Plus. You can also find us on Instagram, Communication R&D, and email us at sherry@epstyleplus.com.